Welcome to the drawing board. I'm your host and in-house artist Erin Leffler. If you joined me before here on the drawing board, welcome back. If this is your first time with me, here's a quick rundown of what happens here on the show. Every episode of the drawing board, I invite guests from around the entertainment industry, and we learn a little bit more about what they do. And while we learn about what they do, I'm also drawing them in real time. Pretty fun, right? Well, I am super excited to introduce y'all to my guest today because we have another animation guest with us, and I'm really sure that you guys are going to have a lot of fun learning from this episode. Not only is he an award winning animation director and animator, but he's also an author and educator, which I think is pretty cool because there's a different side and facet to those things that we can learn about. And we can also learn that you can also do different things with your job. Please welcome my guest, Tony White. Hi there.
Hi everyone, good to see you. Thanks for asking me, Erin.
Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to get to chat with you today, and I'm sure my kids are very excited to learn from this. But for my kids who may not be familiar with what you do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've done?
Yeah, well, I've done lots of things. Probably your parents or even your grandparents may know what I've done. Way back at the beginning of my career, I've had a very lucky career. And the thing that happened in the animation industry many years ago, we're talking about 40, 50 years ago, is they had a thing called apprenticeships. And that meant that you actually got a job assisting somebody who was a master at what they did. And you got paid. In my case, I got paid to do the thing I loved, which was drawing. I've always wanted to draw, always drawn, always been my therapy and my relaxation, still is, even at my age. And so at the beginning of my career, I apprenticed with some of the greatest people, some of the greatest animators. Most of them have passed away long ago now, but they were the greats, the great Disney animators and some other greats from London, where I come from. And I slowly made my way, worked in the industry for a number of years, got the skills and knowledge and the experience necessary. And then I set up my own studio for 20 years and we won all kinds of awards. The animation I do and still do in this digital technological age is hand drawn. I sit and draw 24 drawings a second quite often to make my animated films. And yes, I use computers. Yes, I use technology. They're wonderful. But if I can give you any advice right off the bat, I would say never give up drawing with a pencil. And when I say drawing with a pencil, I don't necessarily mean just drawing what's in your mind or copying anime or anything like that. I mean, actually sit down and look at things and draw them. Try to draw things around you, draw your cat, draw your lamp, draw anything that you can see. Sit, if you're on a school bus, draw other kids on the bus. Draw, because whatever your career, if you're a creative person, and everyone's different, but if you're a creative person, imaginative, artistic, the one thing that's common to all careers, even though we're in the age of computers and technology and everything, is remember that if you are working with a computer, the computer does not do the work for you. The computer is the tool. It's like the pencil, but it's a modern digital thing, just like Erin's drawing now digitally. She couldn't do that unless she learned how to draw with a pencil initially.
Yeah.
And so much of that is removed from your school life these days with the STEM career, the STEM system of education, that the creative among you never get a chance to draw. So really, you've got to take that for yourself. So what have I done? I've done titles way back for your grandparents will remember, maybe your parents, Pink Panther movies with Peter Sellers. I did the title sequence for the Pink Panther Strikes Again. I've done over 200 TV commercials. Most of the serial commercials you see on TV in the past, I've done those. And a number of others. And even though had my studio in London, I was always flying backwards and forwards to New York or Chicago or sometimes LA to do work for clients over here. So most of my work was based in America before I moved here. But yes, I've done all kinds of animation, all kinds of I've had all kinds of learning experiences with very great people, and I'm very inquisitive. So I used to meet a very famous animator I would actually quiz them and find out what they did. And I said, could I help you? Can I sit down and draw with you? Can you? And all kinds of things like that. And you'll find if you can meet people that know what they're doing, be inquisitive. They actually, most of them, 99% of people want to share with you. Trust me, creative people especially. We have a few egotists who think they mustn't talk to anyone, but trust me, and they do exist in the art world, but trust me, most serious animators or artists will share their time with you if you're genuinely interested. No, don't ask them to draw you Mickey Mouse or anything, okay? But find out what they do, find out what their skills are, and be inquisitive and say, how do you do that? And and most of the time they will share with you, and that's how you learn, really. That's almost as good as an apprenticeship, but with an apprenticeship, I apprenticed with a man called Richard Williams, who's one of the greatest animators ever. And I was his apprentice for 18 months. And then he allowed me to be a director animator of commercials in his studio after that. And even now, when I animate, when I work, in my mind, I'm imagining what would he say what I'm doing now? What would he tell me I'm doing wrong? How would he tell me I could get better? And just even having that experience of meeting someone wonderful like that, knowledgeable like that, you're going to find that you will benefit from that and being around. So don't be frightened to be inquisitive. See, truly. At the same time, respect yourself, because as an artist, you've got to respect yourself and you've got to know what you're good at. Most people at your age, if they're interested in animation, it's usually anime or something like anime. But there's only so much room for anime animators or artists out there. Try to find a new thing of your own. Find your own style, find your own development, because that's where new movements begin, by somebody being individual and different. It's a long answer to your question, Erin. So
No, I love it. And it's really cool to hear how you kind of like went through and did a bunch of different things. Because I think a lot of times, because of how we see things online and on our TV, we kind of think, a person is just kind of doing the same job all the time. But it's kind of cool to hear that you did different stuff for like movies, commercials, stuff like that. I think that's really neat because then that kind of gives you a wider aspect of you have a whole bunch of options getting into this industry.
And then I'm extra insane because I call myself a workaholic because I love what I'm doing. I'm going to, my last day on this planet, I'm going to be drawing. There's no question about it. It's just something I love. And in between all the commercial work I did, I made my own films. I made a film called Hokusai right at the beginning of my career, and it won a British Academy Award. And it was about the artwork or the art of Katsushika Hokusai, who was one of the famous Japanese artists in what they call the ukiyo-e era, when they did woodcut prints. And when he was working, he was just a commercial artist. He was just working, doing cheap, what in their culture, in their time, they were cheap little posters that they would sell, and news sheets and things like that. He would illustrate them or do designs. And nobody really respected them at the time. They were just commercial artists. Well, now, if you look at Hokusai's work, he was one of the greatest artists that ever lived. And when I looked at his work, I looked at his sketchbooks, not the originals, I reproduction sketchbooks of his work back in 18th century. And if you looked at his work, I thought this guy would have been an animator if he knew how to animate at the time, because his sketchbooks were full of people in action. They're people digging roads, fixing roofs, digging ditches, all kinds of things. But he would do stage by stage drawings, almost like what we call in animation key drawings. And if he'd known about animation in his time, he would have been an animator, and he would have been an amazing animator, but he didn't. So what I thought when I first saw his work, I thought, I want to be his animator. I want to bring his work to life. And that's what I did. I made a 5.5-minute film. So here's a perspective on what animation, hand-drawn animation, demands of you. I made a 5.5-minute film. It took me 2.5 years. I was doing my day job, my 9 to 5 in the studio with Richard Williams, where I was studying. but I'd go home in the evenings and work till 1 in the morning and work through the weekends. I took 3 months off, all vacations, everything to work on this film. And it took me 2.5 years. But when it was finished, as I said, it won a British Academy Award, which was, for me, still the best award I've ever won, and opened up so many doors. But also, it was really interesting. I went to an exhibition of it, just stood in line with everyone else, and I was standing behind two young Japanese guys, and actually coming out. It was coming out of seeing the film being shown, and they were talking to each other, and they said, "Oh, I wonder who animated that, because he was clearly Japanese." You know, it was so authentic. It looked so like Hokusai's work. And the bottom line was, I did tell them, no, I'm not. I did animate that, and I'm from London and everything. And they went, oh, well, they were amazed at that. But the bottom line is, when I first said to you guys, never stop drawing. Once you have an ability to draw, and I don't mean be like Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo, but when you have an ability to draw in your own style, in your own way, you're capable of drawing in any other style as well. Once you have a capability of controlling a pencil and using your eye and your brain to coordinate your hand, and you get used to drawing after drawing, you can really work in any style. So, if you are creative, never give up a sketchbook. Never. And one of the, sorry, I'll interrupt myself in a way, but I will say, before anything else, there was a famous teacher of animation at the Disney studio, not the Disney studio of today, but when Walt Disney was alive. It was the greatest studio in the world, if ever. Still, it was then, not now, but then it was the greatest studio in the world. And apart from maybe Studio Ghibli in Japan with Hayao Miyazaki, probably there's no studio that's rivaled it. And in those days, they had art teachers. They would come in and teach the animators were like master artists in their own right. But Walt would bring teachers in, like Walt Stanchfield and people like that, to teach their animators how to draw better. And one of them said, everyone has a masterpiece drawing in them. The problem is you've got to do 10,000 bad ones to get to it. And that was the lesson. Just draw, and eventually you'll find who you are as an artist. And you may not be an animator, you may be a painter, an illustrator, a caricaturist, whatever it is, listen to your heart. What does your heart want to do, and go with that.
Absolutely. And you bring up a great point about always learning, because this is something, this actually ties into something I love getting to talk about, because there's a wide discourse in the art community on whether secondary schooling, after you finish, your regular schooling that you have to go through here in the United States or anywhere across the globe, that secondary schooling is essential to get into this industry. Do you think that schooling, like art schooling or college specifically, is something that kids have to go through, or do you think that they can also kind of just learn in their own way?
Depends what their objectives are, because every aspiring student has an objective. What do you want to do when you grow up? And oh, by the way, never grow up. Okay, never grow up. If you're an artist, you'll never grow up. All right, that keeps you young and that keeps you vital. But I kind of disappoint people. I've taught in many places. I've taught in degree course colleges. I was a dean of one, and I do run my own online school, the 2D Academy. But I really shock parents when I tell them, your parents are the ones who pay the bills, remember. So you've got to respect that, and you've got to be nice to them because they pay the bills, all right? And yes, in answer to your question, Erin, a lot of the time going to college, going to some kind of secondary education is a real help. But the bottom line is, if you run a studio, you are desperate for talented people. The industry has got lots of jobs, not as many as they used to. And at the moment, it's a different world with pandemic and things like that. But they always want talent. I spoke to a big recruiter at Pixar Studios down in California. Sorry, what am I trying to say? Northern California. And the recruiter, I said to them, what is the thing that students are most lacking when they come to you? And they said, well, the problem we have is that every college teaches a degree course in animation. They'll teach all the latest software like Maya for 3D animation or Illustrator, or they teach all the software for artists and animators to be talented. And we see their show reels. Show reel is when you do animation, you put it together on a video and you show it as your show reel to show people what you can do. And they said they see 1,000 show reels a month, and everyone looks pretty much identical, and all have very good technological training, but most of them don't know how to animate, and they want to get a job as an animator. And they think knowing the software means they're an animator, and the Pixar people say, no, it doesn't. If a kid comes to us and hand draws a little stick figure, even if it's not beautifully designed or, it's not in color, it's just a stick figure, but it moves beautifully, we will probably hire that kid immediately because he has a feeling for movement. And we can teach him software. Anyone can learn software. As I said earlier, you can learn software on YouTube. So I disappoint parents by saying to them, look, the reality of it in this world is, yes, you can put your kids through college and do a degree course in art, animation, whatever it is, but it doesn't guarantee a job. You're spending a lot of money. And if the student coming out of that course is no different from all the other students coming out from all the other courses, there's no guarantee they're going to get work. If they're different, if they have something behind them, if they have talent, they'll be snapped up immediately. So the question is, how do you get to be that good? Well, probably 1 in a million is naturally good. One in a million will have that skill that everyone goes, wow, that's an amazing talent. You see pianists at the age of 12 and they play like the greatest maestros in the world. They come along occasionally, but most of the time it doesn't. So how do you get good? Well, most people get good by going to a good college. Now, if colleges offer degree courses in animation or art and everything, it doesn't mean to say they're good colleges. And sorry, colleges, you're not going to like what I hear, what I'm going to say, but I can think of a handful or just over a handful of colleges or schools in the USA and Canada that are worthy of the name animation course. They really are very good, and the rest are not so good. So my advice, if you're going to go to college, is number one, see what they've done in the past, but number two, more importantly, see who's teaching what they're doing now. Because a college can have a fantastic reputation from the past, but they have really bad teachers right now, and teachers come and go. Trust me, having been in education many years, in formal education many years, you get bored with it. And sometimes the system's so against, especially in the art fields, the system's so against you that you just can't stand the environment anymore and you move on. And so they have to fill the places. They don't always fill the places with the best people. So always, if you don't ask the questions, get your parents to ask the questions. Who's teaching and what have they done and what do they know? Because that's going to make the difference between a good college and a bad college. I don't know who's beeping. Is it you or me?
I don't see anything on my end, so
Okay.
it might be coming from that end. It's okay. Beeps happen.
All right. Sorry, I don't even know where they're coming from. It might be all those colleges getting angry at me for saying what I'm saying, but
no, but I think that's great to hear, because there's a lot of times that it's almost put up on a pedestal, people who end up going to these schools, but it's also good to know that not all the time are these programs the perfect way to get into this.
Yeah. And yes, and that's where I was leading to, is that before the beeping happened, some colleges are really good, and yes, 90% of the students going there are going to love it and they're going to get better. The object is to be good enough for the industry. But there are other ways. If you're a very determined person, and if you don't fit into the corporate college environment, which most of it is these days, and in America, it's very much about making money out of education. So, you know, you've got to really question them. What have you done? Who's teaching? What is the teacher's knowledge? You can still, but if you're determined and you don't want to get into that big setup, or unfortunately if your parents can't afford to send you to college, there are other ways. Number one is draw, just draw. Study, see other people's work, look at other artists, try to find out why they were like they were. But also go to community colleges, local community colleges. The pressure is not so much on at a community college or a local college or an online school. Some online schools are good too, some. And but pick and choose. You don't need. The other thing I wanted to say, by the way, and the big news is, because of everything else I've just said, if you're an employer, and I ran a studio for 20 years, I never once asked to see a degree. I never once asked a student, where's your degree? Because it didn't matter. What I was looking at was, number one, their portfolio, their show reel, their what animation have they done before, or what drawings have they done before. And the second thing that we look for, because in animation, it's a team game. In the commercial world, it's a team game. You have to fit in with a team. So what is your personality like? You could be the world's biggest genius at what you do, but if you're obnoxious and arrogant, they're not going to hire you. Trust me, they're not going to hire you. They'd rather go for somebody who's not quite so talented, but is much more flexible, more open to a team environment, more keen to learn from other people, and rather than tell other people how good they are. So they're the two things, and however you get to that position is up to you. Some people will thrive in a very disciplined college environment. Other people will pick and choose their courses, go to a community college, do a life drawing class, go and do a painting class, go and do, whatever class it is that appeals to you. And somewhere along the way, all these things are going to fuse, and you are going to find you in all that fusion, in those things coming together. And then you're going to offer something that's unique to you, and that's what they're looking for. And that's what the Pixar people were telling me. And they said the one thing that all the students lacked that were coming to see them, or 99% of the students, was a portfolio of drawings. Everyone's doing computer animation, everyone's learning the latest special effects software, and they're doing all this digital stuff, but everyone's neglecting, including the colleges, the hand drawing, the observational drawing, gesture drawing, and things like that. And the Pixar people say after a while, they don't even look at the show reels anymore. If the student doesn't have drawing skills or a portfolio of drawing, they're not that interested at all. And then if you research some of the greatest animators around right now, working in the digital world, I got friends at Pixar, and they go home and do drawing. They go home because they know they never, what we were saying earlier on, Erin, they never stop learning. And at my age, I never stop learning. I'm always inquisitive about things, and the artist has to be inquisitive. So stay young, be a child all your life, but be inquisitive and never stop drawing. That's my advice.
I love that. And you actually touched on something I think is a very important thing. You were talking about having the right attitude in the field, because a lot of times that's a bit challenging, because society today kind of promotes, being all for one and one for all, but
Yeah.
a lot of times it's more of like a me first kind of, it's all
Yeah.
about me attitude. So it sounds like it's pretty important to at least be able to work with others in this field as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the culture does say you can be anything you want. It's a myth. Trust me, it's a myth. But be yourself is another catchphrase people say. And that's true if you know how to be yourself, because there's two sides to ourselves, right? There's the outside world self that we look in a mirror and we see it, and other people see us, and we're working in the outside world. And the outside world, depending on where you are, is going to ask you to conform to certain things and fit in. and that's very, if they're paying you to do that, then you've got to learn to be able to do that. But there's the person inside you, and this is where I say it's like the artist inside you on the creative front. It's that artist in there that when I did all the commercial, I did 200 commercials. Very few I really loved doing the commercials. It was a means to an end for me. It brought in an income. It allowed me to study animation and try different things in my private time, experiment and everything. It paid lots of bills. And if you're interested, it gives you a great lifestyle if you can get regular work and stay in that world. But the inner side of you wants to do something else. The Hokusai film I made was for the inner me, not the outer me. There was no way, when I made that film, I knew it. It took me 2.5 years. I knew I'd never make $1 from that film. I knew it. Sometimes you just have to do what your heart wants to do. And that separates you, because the interesting thing was, even though I made the film with no expectation of a career or money or fame or anything when I made that film, I just had to make that film. That film was a springboard that allowed me to set up my studio. It allowed me to win other awards. It brought lots of clients to me, and it allowed me to live the life I've had, which is not all about money, but it's about pleasure, enjoying myself as an artist, and being able to do the things I want to do. And once you have that little bit of individuality of what's inside you that you can show the world, you get more chance of doing that, rather than just fitting in like a clone into the system and they plug you in and do what you want. One of the colleges actually said that, and I resigned from that college when I heard it, but one of the top administrators, not the teachers, but the people running the business of the college, and I heard them telling someone, well, you know, what we're doing, we're in the business of making clones for the gaming industry, and that, but high quality clones, meaning that they tried to beat the individuality out of every student, and that's not a good thing. Now, yes, you've got to earn a living, yes, you've got to fit into the world, and yes, animation for sure is a team game, but save a bit for yourself, and when you go home, do something of your own. Even now at school, go home if you've got lots of homework and everything, when you're finished, pick up, if you love playing the piano, play the piano in your spare time. If you're an artist, pick up a sketchbook. If you want to do animation, you can pick up the sketchbook, and also you don't have to buy all the equipment. You can get a little pad like this size with lots of pages in it and do a flip book. You draw it from the back, or you can go any way you like, front to back, back to front, but every drawing is slightly different, and when you flip it, it's animating. And some of the greatest animators have produced some amazing flip books. There's some really bad flip books and really good ones, but look them up on YouTube. And, you know, I actually did a course. I have a course, actually a video course, two video courses I did that support everything I'm telling you now. One is called Drawing for Animation, which is ultimately, I'm still adding to it, but it's ultimately going to be 52 assignments that take you through lots of observational drawing exercises, but every one has a relevance to animation, and I tell you why you're learning it and how it works in animation. So you're really learning animation just from doing observational drawing or gesture drawings. The other course was actually for China, for Chinese English learning students in China. For whatever reason, it was decided that it would be really cool if they made flip books and learn English while they're doing it. So I did a whole course on how to do flip books, and it was purely an animation course on flip books, how to have fun with flip books. But embedded in the video were English words. When I spoke them, they'd pull up an English word, and then they'd show the video, and then afterwards in their classroom, they'd explain the words and talk about the English words. So, but things like, you can do animation without needing lots of equipment and technology and digital software and all that. Just do it for the joy of moving things, because sometimes you can do it in the corner. Oh, I shouldn't say this, in the corner of a book, but you can do it in the corner of a book. when we were kids at school, and I'm not recommending this, kids, don't do it because you're probably digital anyway now. But in the corner of our textbooks, like when we were bored in a math class or something, artists get bored in math class usually. We
Yep.
started drawing little stick figures in the corner on every page, and they were doing slightly different. And then we'd flip the corner of the pages, and you'd see the stick figures move. And to me, that was such fun. It was magic to me. And sometimes even our enlightened teachers came over to see what we'd done, because although we shouldn't have been doing it, they actually enjoyed it too. So, deep down, a lot of adults are children at heart as well. So just that's why I say never grow up. Be children, even in your later life, like I am.
I like that. And that kind of ties in with something I also like talking about with not growing up, because a lot of times in society, kids kind of think the only way to be good at a job is just to do it all the time, because what we see on social media, everyone makes a hustle out of everything. But humans were very interesting creatures because we have multiple likes and dislikes and things that we want to try. So I love getting to talk a little bit about hobbies because I feel like hobbies are something that kind of goes hand in hand with a job. Now, for you, do you think that hobbies help you be better at a job? And if so, do you have any hobbies that you like to do?
Well, I'm kind of boring because my hobby is animation. I just, if I've got a moment spare, I'll sit down and draw. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and start animating. And I'm usually there till 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning. And I average 5 hours of sleep at night. And I'm either preparing my classes to teach animation I have high school students mostly. I do a Tuesday night online class that has students in Portugal, in China, and the UK,
Wow.
but mainly it's for Northwest community here, that high school level kids. I'm preparing that. So I'm doing animation to show and to explain and recording videos and things like that. But when I'm not doing that, I'm animating my own work. But yes, again, it's about being inquisitive about life. You don't have to study academically, but be fascinated by lots of things. There's a wonderful channel, even at my age, little things fascinate me, and especially traditions, art traditions and craft traditions and that. And there's NHK is a cable station here in the States, which is actually Japanese television for the world. NHK is main Japanese television company, and they never have commercials, and they have news at the top of the hour for about 15 minutes, and then they maybe have some documentaries about different things, science or medicine or things, but big chunks of their program are about the Japanese tradition, the craftsmen and the artists, and it's so beautiful, and they have such a respect for nature. Now, I'm not going to do any of those things, but I'm so fascinated and I'm inquisitive about it. And sometimes these things rub off in your own work. Basically, from an artist's point of view or an animator's point of view, basically what life is a big data bank of information. As an artist, you should be a good observer of life, especially as an animator. You should observe people. People watching is absolutely crucial to being an animator. Watch how they walk. Everyone, for instance, one of the key things I teach are animated walks. Animated walks are the hardest thing to do, to pull them off correctly, but you'll be amazed what you can do once you know the ground rules, the foundational rules of how to do an animation walk. Because when you watch people walking, you learn that we're all doing the same thing. We're all basically putting one leg in front of the other, swinging our arms as we go along. But if you look deeper at people, when you really start people watching, you'll see everyone does it differently. It's like fingerprints. We've all got fingerprints, but there's no two the same. Walks are like that. People are like that. And when you see people walking, sometimes they're limping, sometimes they're dragging their feet because they're going to the dentist and they don't want to go and they're trying to delay, or sometimes they're really excited because something's happening, a sports event or something they really want to be at and they want to get there as quickly as possible. The way they walk is very different. Somebody who's very old will not walk like somebody who's very young. Somebody who's walking into the wind will not walk the same way as somebody who's got the wind pushing them forward, going uphill, going downhill, happy, sad, whatever their emotions, that changes the way they walk. So being an animator, even an artist, you have to look at people, you have to look at body language, you have to look at attitude. And as I say, with animation, you have to look at how do they move. Now, you won't be able to animate how they move unless you know the core principles of doing the generic version of like walking. What's the generic walk? And that's what one of the main things I teach when I teach animation is to show students how does a character walk generically, meaning it's without emotion, without any special personality, but mechanically, how do we do a walk? And actually, it's much harder than you think. If you try and do it, you'll find out. But once you know the mechanics, once you know the generic, then you can start seeing, oh, I see. But instead of the person putting their leg in this position at that stage of their stride, they're actually putting it there. And they're not, their legs are not going straight through like most people's do. They're going round. Why are they? And sometimes people, heavy people, I'm pretty heavy, but really heavy people, they tend to rock from side to side because they're having to negotiate the weight they're carrying. Their legs are not as strong with that amount of weight. So they have to shift their weight over the leg that's on the ground while they move the other leg. Then they have to shift their body over to that leg. And we all do that in a walk anyway. But when you see big people, they do it much more. So when you're animating heavy characters, whether they're overweight people or big gorillas or monsters or whatever, you have to put more of that thing. But you only get that by observing life. And Erin's doing it, observing life right now. And whenever she does a caricature or an illustration or whatever, I guarantee 90% of the time she's observing life, not drawing what's in her imagination. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
and that's exactly it. I think you bring out a great point there because that is something that I think is a great lesson to learn in advance when doing something like this is you have to observe life all the time because sometimes if you're trying to do it just straight out of your imagination, it might come out stiff, it might not come out looking the right way because you're not actually looking at something that would naturally do the
yeah,
action.
yeah, yeah. And that's why I teach when I have in my drawing for animation courses, I almost 100% focus on students drawing what they're looking at, not what they're imagining, because we can all do imaginative drawings. And most of the time they can be fun, but if you're going to get a career out of this, if you're going to or sell your work, even if you're not going for a job, but you're just as an artist selling your work, you want to take it you don't want to do what you imagine. Imagination comes at the very beginning. Once you get the idea, okay, that's your imagination, but you don't want to draw from that idea. So say, for instance, as an animator, you've got this idea, this big dragon is walking along and it's going to attack someone, okay? Well, that's your idea in your mind. Now, if I was doing that animation right now, if I sat down right now and animated a dragon going along, I wouldn't sit down and draw what I think is in my mind. What I'd do is I'd sit down and look at geckos and lizards, and I'd watch to see how they move, because the nearest thing to dragons in the real world are reptiles. And reptiles will give you a lot of clues and ideas how to really make your animation of a dragon move better. And the better it is, Walt Disney had this great saying, plausible implausibility. He always insisted on it, plausible implausibility, meaning that animation is implausible. You can make people walk in midair and not fall down, okay? But if you don't make it in the audience's mind plausible in the world they're looking at, they're not going to buy it. They're just going to see through the tricks. They're going to see the mirror. They're going to see whatever your tricks you're trying to use. They're not going to go along with it. But if you make it plausible in the world, if there's a reason why somebody walks off a cliff and is in midair and not crashing down through gravity, if it's plausible in the world they're looking at, they'll accept it and identify it with it. And the same with dragons. If you draw a dragon that you're imagining and you don't make it move really logically, it's not going to sell it to the people you're trying to sell it to. But if you study how the nearest thing we've got to dragons are lizards and reptiles and geckos and things like that, watch them moving. Go on YouTube, watch them moving, and then put that into your imaginative character. That character is going to come alive. All the great animators do that. Even my friends at Pixar, wherever they're working, quite often they're given an assignment to animate a character. I have a friend who did one of the major sequences in Ratatouille, the movie and before he even started animating, he went home in his basement. He wouldn't do it in front of people, but he actually put a video camera, his mobile phone up on video on a stand, and acted out everything that he wanted. And he did it several times over and over again, and played it back. And he said, that's not quite how the character would do it. So, maybe I'll try this. And then he'd do it again. And after about 10 attempts, he got to somewhere where he thought, I never thought of that in the first place, but that's so much better than what I thought of in the first place. By acting it out, he couldn't obviously go and get other people to do it, so he did it himself. And then he showed it to the director, and the director said, fantastic, that's way beyond what I briefed you to do, explained to you. That's perfect, go and do that. And then he went and started animating it. So, looking at life or recreating in a real world for you, for your imaginative idea, is really, really important. That's why gesture drawing from observation, keeping a sketchbook from observation, is the best thing you can do, whatever you're going to be in the creative field.
Absolutely. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a different facet of what you've done because I think it's really neat, and I love getting to talk about, switching gears in a way in this industry, because you've gone from doing animation and directing to now educating and writing books, which I think is really cool because we can always use people and little tips here and there to help us out and to help us improve along the way. Did you ever find there was trouble, because you still do little different things in animation here and there? Did you ever find you had trouble at times when either writing or teaching, kind of switching gears from like the artist mind to an educator type of mind?
No, not really. My hardest problem is existing in the academic world. That's a different thing to what you're asking. In what you're asking is that the way to write a book about something you love doing is to speak from your heart. As I said, I was trained apprenticed by one of the greatest animators ever. And through that association, I met some of the greatest animators from Disney when they were still alive, and they were old guys then. And they'd come over to London and we'd pick their brains and I'd learn from them. And I found that I learned so much from them, but the way they taught and they shared their knowledge and experience was through friendship. They were just lovely people, caring, and they wanted to help. They wanted to share their knowledge and pass it on. And so what I realized with my books, that the only way of approaching it is not to do it academically, is to share it as if there's a student in front of me and I'm just trying to give them everything I know. And I still do that with my classes. Even though I do live classes, a lot of the material in it I pre-record. And I can, that way, because when you're running a live class, you've got to worry about Zoom, or you've got to worry about this, you've got to worry about that. So many things to worry about. You can't free up. And I like to free up when I'm sharing and communicating and everything. So even with my books, quite often I would sit with an imaginary student in front of me and just talk it into a microphone and record everything, or sit at my desk and put my mobile phone camera on me, and I talk to my phone. And that way I could communicate in a human way, not in an academic way, not in a stuffy, these are the rules, you've got to obey the rules. You have to do it with math. But although I've seen some fantastic math teachers who really don't do the traditional math thing, and I learned so much more. I had boring teachers when I was at school and I never learned anything, and I've never used anything, that they taught me, except addition and subtraction and division and multiplication. That's all I've ever needed in life. If you're going to go into engineering and science, it's another matter, but of course. But as an artist and somebody who's passionate about those non-academic things, um, I've never needed it. So in a way, it was a waste of time, although the system said I had to do it. But anyway, so writing my books, I always have an imaginary student there. I have two imaginary things happening. I have an imaginary student who I'm writing the book to, and at the back of my mind, I'm imagining Richard Williams, my great teacher when I was apprenticing, looking over my shoulder and saying, "That's not right." And I have this imaginary. I don't really see him. I didn't really talk to him, but in my mind, I was having this conversation based on years of experience of studying with him, of making sure my information was correct or I was explaining it in the right. And then it's just a question of throwing lots of images of things I've done together into my books to explain them, you know. And I find that when I give lectures, other than today, where I'm really just talking on camera, normally when I do a presentation, I'll fill it with clips of animation and pictures, because again, we come back to the picture is worth 1,000 words. So I'll give a few words and then show something, and people get it by seeing what I'm showing. And that's why I find with my animation books, I try to pack them with as much visual material as possible, because that supports the words.
Absolutely. I think that's really neat because I think a lot of times when people make a switch over into a different thing, it's a little challenging to kind of figure out how to do it seamlessly. But hearing that you can kind of apply the same mindset to a
Yeah,
different form of the work is really cool too.
yeah. Well, again, it's that training your imagination rather than your intellectual mind, your imaginative mind, the ones in dreams or daydreams, or the one where you can visualize things. I'm very good at visualizing things. Before I do animation, I study everything. Uh, well, the imagination part comes in a scene I did for a project, on my own project called The Hermit, where there's an old hermit teaching a young guy wisdom. And I actually, in a flash in my mind, saw that scene in my head playing out before I even did one little sketch. And I thought that's how it's got to be. Now, having said that, then I did my research. Then I found, what do caves look like? He's standing at the front of a cave. We're at the back of a cave, looking at the cave entrance, and they're looking out into the night sky beyond them, and they're talking with their backs to us. You know, they always say in theater and cinema, don't have the character with their backs to you. But in this scene, it was perfect. I just saw it in a flash in my imagination, and I had to do it. But then I had to do the research. What do caves look like from that viewpoint? And I had to go and do lots of research. It's how am I going to treat the stars beyond them? How are they going to move? And I decided to keep it very simple, not big movement, not cartoony squash, what we call squash and stretch and things like that. And it worked really well. But writing books is slightly different. But again, I live in that imaginative world. Imagine I'm talking to a student, and what would you say to that student? What and I try to anticipate their problems with what I'm saying. You know, what did he mean by that? And then that's conversation going on in my head. What do you mean by that? Oh, what I meant by that, I should have said, and then I have to rewrite it because I didn't say it right. And but it all goes on in my head, not on that imaginative level. And I think that's why the books have been successful for me, because people tell me, oh, they're so easy to absorb. It's like you're talking to me, um, and that's where they came from.
That is really neat. Now, I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes throughout the years in the industry, and I love talking about this too a little bit because there have been incredible changes and there's been a lot of new faces now popping up in the industry. We're hearing a lot of new and exciting stories come into the industry because there's a lot more different types of people. I love talking a little bit about diversity and how good it is for the industry in order to hear these new stories. So, do you think that it's good for kids to see people that look like them, talk like them, speak the same language that they do? in the industry that they want to work in? And do you think it could have a positive effect on them?
Um, Look like them, talk like them. I like all people from all countries. I've been lucky. I've traveled all over the world, and I find that whatever their language, whatever their skin color, whatever their belief system or their politics, on an artistic level, you just sit down, you can draw together and communicate. One of the weirdest experiences in my life was an Argentinian animator came to London at one point and couldn't speak English, could speak Italian, um, but invited me and my wife to dinner. And so we had this dinner pretty much where neither of us could speak the other person's language, but we actually sat down and sketches, or we mimed out movement, and being, because he was an animator, we mimed it out and we kind of communicated that way. So diversity is really, really important. So is individuality, you know. You've got to respect you as an individual, you as yourself, especially as an artist, because that's where your uniqueness comes from yourself. But at the same time, embrace everyone else's individuality, because they all have, we're all looking at, if we're all looking at one thing around, imagine we're in a field or something, we're all looking at one thing, everyone around that field is seeing it from a slightly different angle. So that guy over there, 60 degrees to me over there, looking at the same thing I'm looking at, is not seeing exactly the same thing. So maybe I can learn something from him or her, from their viewpoint. And you've just got to keep your mind open to all the viewpoints, all the options. And you're going to look at different art styles. You're going to listen to different people. Some people are going to really resonate with you, and you're going to say, wow, I'm really, I don't know, admire that person, respect their person, love their work, whatever it is. And others, you're going to say, I know they're good, but I can't stand what they're doing. And you're going to get that. And that's another thing, guys. Just be aware that there is criticism out there, and people are going to try and put you down. And sometimes they're doing it for good reasons, and sometimes there's a thing called tough love, and they really want to help you, but the only way to get through to you is to be tough, and they're going to do that. But then there's the mean ones who are jealous of you, and they're going to see your work, and they're going to say, oh well, I don't know why you think you're so good, because and they're not as good, and they're trying to give you a bad time and undermine you and bring you down. You're going to find all those things in life, in the art field, in the animation world, just as much as you're going to find it everywhere else. I'm sure you do in your classrooms, when you're in your classrooms and everything. So, but use them, because you know what? If you look at the old Disney films, and probably some of the modern ones, I'm not so keen on modern Disney films, but the really old classic Disney films, they always have a strong villain. Okay,
Yeah.
male or female, really powerful. In fact, they're easier to animate, by the way, than a cute hero or cute heroine or something like that. The villain's always the tough one. But do you know why they're so good and so well animated? Because the animators are taking experiences from their lives with the mean people they've met, or the aggressive people, or some horrible moment in their life, and they've transmuted it into something incredible on the screen that represent and gets all their emotions out. So that's the other good thing about being creative, by the way, is that horrible things happen to you, to all of us in life, but you can transmute it, you can transform it through your work, you can get it out through your art and your expression and whatever. And it's a good way of channeling and a good way of harmonizing things. So, I don't know if I'm answering your question, Erin, but diversity of
Absolutely.
experience, diversity of experience is valuable on so many levels. Even the bad experiences are really valuable. Just don't get beaten up by them, don't get downtrodden by them. Always believe in yourself, because you have that one viewpoint in a field that no one else has, and you see something different to everyone else in, from their viewpoints. But respect them too, because they may be saying something you're missing. So, it's about embracing everything, but being true to yourself.
Absolutely. And you brought up something that I think is just wonderful, because I've heard this from a lot of fellow animators, and I think it's a great point because a lot of times in the society that we live in now, everything feels like more of a competition. Everything's just so competitive because it's just everything is so fast and it's me first in this type of society we live in. But art is one of these wonderful things that no matter where we come from, who we are, our background, our skin color, you name it, we
Mm.
can all connect through it in some way, shape, or form. It's kind of like this language without actually speaking
Yeah.
that we can connect through. So I love that point that you brought out because I think that's a great thing to keep in mind getting into this because then you don't feel constricted in this industry. Then you know, like, oh, there's a place for me still in this industry because I can communicate
Yeah.
with other people who may not have the same experiences that I do.
Yeah. And you just reminded me. The other day, I saw this short film, and I think it's the Oscars are coming around, and they're choosing the qualifying films for the Oscars, and it's a qualifying film for the Oscar, short film. And I don't know if it will get through to the nominations or even the award, but it was just so beautiful. And now I normally, because I'm a traditional hand drawn animator, and we're a rarity in this world, by the way. If you want to do it really, you're going to have to do it in your own time rather than as a career. In this country, other countries are different, but in this country, the USA. But I saw this 3D animated film, and normally to me, they all look the same. They're all the same characters, especially the Hollywood. You've seen one male character in 3D. They're like all the same. You see one
Yeah.
3D princess. They all look the same. The songs even sound the same after a while. But I saw this film from Hawaii, and sadly I can't remember who did it or what the title is, but it's a very beautiful film. I did post it on my Facebook page, and it's recreating a myth from way back. They're trying to preserve their tradition, their myths and legends and
Oh,
everything,
wow.
and it's so beautiful. I actually ended up with all my styles. It was just so beautiful. They approached it with 3D animation, which, as I say, normally all looks the same, these shiny plastic faces and whatever. But this wasn't. This was done almost like moving painted art. I know it was done in 3D CG animation using computer animation, but they treated it. It looks like paintings, primitive paintings of the gods and goddesses or the main characters in the story, in the myth and legend, coming alive. And the lighting was beautiful, the story was beautiful, English subtitles because it was all in native language, and it was so beautiful. And it just again, we're coming back to diversity, just seeing that and absorbing that, and just think, oh, they're looking from a different part in a same field, different viewpoint, and they've come at it in a entirely refreshing new way. And that was so rewarding, to see that. And again, this is where people's individuals, one person probably did a little sketch on a piece of paper, and that started that whole project. And it just went, they took it as a team, they took it and made something really beautiful. And that happens sometimes. And probably it's not done for money. It's done again from their heart. They wanted to keep their tradition and their legends and their myths alive, and they wanted to do it in a beautiful contemporary way. So they were respecting the past, but using the technology of the present to do it. And it was just wonderful. The way the politics of the Academy, the Oscar Academy works, it probably won't win. It deserves to win, absolutely. But I've
Yeah.
seen some big injustices in the past, so I don't know if it's going to win. But definitely check it out. It's a Hawaiian film, and it's part of I think there's 10 finalists. They're going to take 5 out of those and make them the official nominations, and then one of those will win the Oscar. But I don't know if it will get there. It deserves to win the Oscar as far as I'm concerned, but who knows? But that film was very beautiful, and I recommend everyone look at it just to see how different it looks from Hollywood, you know?
Well, I'm definitely going to make sure to try to find that link and link that below so you guys can check that out because that definitely sounds beautiful. And I love hearing that there's animated films like that being nominated, at least, or considered for a nomination in a category like that because we need news stories like that around. And seeing different styles of animation kind of breaks through the monotony of seeing all the same styles of animation all the time on screen. So it's definitely very exciting to hear these things coming up.
Right. Well, and here's another tip, not a tip. I don't do predictions, especially with the Academy. You can't predict anything. But one of the most beautiful films this year nominated for the animated movie, is a film called Wolf Walkers.
I
And
love that film.
yeah, Wolf Walkers is made by a man called Tom Moore and Ross Stewart. They co-directed it. Ross Stewart is more of an artist designer coming from that direction, and Tom is the filmmaker, writer. He's not the writer of the movie, but he's more of a writer, animator. They work together. Tom Moore. Anyway, what I was going to say about this is there's hope for everyone because this is their third Oscar nomination. I'm assuming they're going to get a nomination because it's a small
So
film, but it's,
good.
in terms of budget, it's so good. It another one that deserves to win. But if it gets the nomination, it'll be the third nominated Oscar they've had for movies, and they come from a tiny town in Ireland. In terms of Hollywood, they're a tiny little. It's a village compared with Hollywood, and but they make films from the heart. Their very first film was called The Secret of Kells, and that was made by things are different in Europe to America. You can actually have a career and an industry and get funding for movies more in Europe because of the way the European situation is set up. But they get funding from the European sources. They made this film, and on the surface, it's a film about a 13th century ornate Bible that the monks drew. It's called illuminated scripts. If you look at old Bibles, they have these beautiful illuminated scripts and texts, all handwritten. The whole Bible was handwritten by monks over years and years and years. So you think, well, that's not really an interesting storyline from an animation point of view. Where's the action? And Tom Moore wove this wonderful mythical story about nature spirits and all kinds of powerful imagery, and created this story called Secret of Kells. And in terms of Hollywood, it was a tiny little budget, tiny little production, but it was a heartfelt one. It was made with love and care and all the best qualities that artists can generate when they care about something. And that film got a nomination. Now, for a small film like that to get a nomination in the Oscars is the independent filmmaker's equivalent of winning an Oscar. Just to get a nomination, you've won, and you're never in the politics of Hollywood. It's very unlikely that an independent film will ever win the Oscar. They'll get nomination if they're lucky, but they'll never win. Now, I think Wolf Walkers, his third one, which I almost certain will get nominated, is the one that's probably going to, if any of them are going to win,
Yeah.
it's going to win. It's an amazing film, Wolf Walkers, and it's a third of a trilogy. He made 3 films about Irish tales and legends, and he's evolved them and everything. It's a very powerful and very beautiful film, and that's what I say about, is it ever going to make him a billionaire like Hollywood movies do? Make people No, but he's going to he's made a career out of it. He's built a studio out of it. It's a wonderful studio. People all want to work there. And it's one of these little gems. It's a little oasis in the desert of what the industry's like. But they do beautiful work, and it's possible. And it's just one person or 2 people in this case that just have a burning desire to make this film, and they cash in all their chips and they do everything they can to get it made. And when it's made, it really shows up. And a lot of independent animated movies come out that way. Brazil is really famous. Japan's very famous. And pretty much the whole world except America is making independent and animated movies, especially hand-drawn or digitally hand-drawn animated movies.
Absolutely. And 100% agree with you. I really hope that that one gets the nomination and actually wins it this year because it's just such a beautiful film. And also, it's in a 2D style, which
Yeah.
is really, really rare to find these days because the market is saturated in 3D films. Not that they're bad, but there is a lot of them, and there is a special magic and art to 2D films. So hopefully we get to see that happen because it definitely deserves it.
Well, the thing about hand drawn is that your emotions come out through your drawings. You know, if as I said, sometimes you can get out bad emotions or bad memories, bad experiences in life through your creative impulses, through your skills. But sometimes good, and more often than not, good things come through your drawings as well. But your soul comes out. You know, artists talk about soul. Artists are very close to their souls. What is it they're burning to do? What it's not intellect. It's from the heart. It's what you care about, what you really believe in and care about. And artists make big sacrifices for that very often. But those kind of hand-drawn films, that spirit or that soul pours out through the drawings. In a 3D animated movie, just think of it, they're like puppets. They're virtual puppets in 3D. They make the models beforehand. One person models them, and then everyone uses that model to do the animation. And there can be some incredible animation. But really, once the models are created, the animator can put some emotion into that character, but the character itself is pretty standard. It's pretty generic for the whole film. And as I say, design-wise, all the films look the same in many cases. But when you're drawing things from animator to an animator, quite often there's a slight difference in the drawing style, very slight. We try to compensate for that and even it all out. But sometimes, if you've got the eye to look, you'll see that, for instance, an animator that has, I got big hands, okay? Animators with big hands tend to draw their characters with big hands, but animators with little hands draw their characters with little hands. And if you, from scene to scene, if you train your eye, you'll see the difference. But the audience doesn't see it, of course. But all those little imperfections come across as something unique. They come across in a different way. The other thing with drawn animation, usually, is that it never dates. I can still look at the Disney films made back in 1930, 40, 50 and love them. I mean, the taste is a little bit different today to what it was then. But if you look at some of the movement in Pinocchio and Bambi, Fantasia, Fantasia was, in my opinion, the greatest film ever made. It's not a great story, but, you know, it's bitty. It's lots of short films kind of squeezed together with a kind of very
Yeah.
thin storyline. But if you look at each animation cameo piece, each story in itself, some of those, they're so beautifully done, handcrafted. They never had technology that we have now. We can't recreate them anymore. We cannot do what they did. And they're animated so beautiful. Even with all the Hollywood 3D animated movies and everything, most of them are not animated. Their movement, their personality, the expression that comes through the characters are nowhere near as good as was done way back then. And that's the difference between being an artist coming to a computer and a technician coming to a computer. There are exceptions. The better people at Pixar, for instance, at the early days when Pixar first set up, they were all the hand-drawn animators from Disney, and they just put them on computers and said, do what you do, because we don't know how to, we're technicians. We can give you the software, but we don't know how to make things move and make believable characters and tell great stories and everything. So they got the hand-drawn guys to come in, and that's how the Pixar tradition started building up, bringing the artist to the software, you know. I always say that, bring the artist to the software. Be the artist first, then do the software thing, and you're going to be so far ahead of everyone else.
Absolutely. Now, one last question for you, my favorite one, because I feel like it takes everything and ties it in a nice bow and puts everything together. If there's a kid out there watching this right now that's interested in getting into the field or even now just curious to learn more about it, what do you think the one thing that they should walk away from this learning is?
Um, the thing I've said all along is, if you in any way want to express yourself visually, never give up on the sketchbook. draw. Just you look at the, if you're interested in animation, that's especially so. Even if you're going to be a computer animator and just do all your animation on the computer, what you bring to the computer is going to make the difference. So in order to start your career off, keep sketchbooks. Yes, do drawings from imagination, but also a lot of kids draw from their imagination all the time, 100% of the time. But don't do that all the time. Maybe 10% of the time. The rest of it, observe. And again, like I was saying about if you're animating a dragon, look at lizards, draw lizards, watch how they're study their skeletons. How do they move? That's going to make your dragon movement much better. How to Train Your Dragon. I'm sure they looked at millions of reptile gecko movies, videos, and everything. But as a kid just starting out, your platform, your foundation, and I like my courses are all foundational for kids that want to take the next step to maybe college or somewhere into the industry. Your foundation is always going to be sketchbooks, drawing, observe life and put it down. Even if I give a lot of exercises to my kids in a gesture drawing. We warm up before every animation class, and we do about 15 minutes warm up observational drawing. And I give them pictures or videos and things to draw. But I time it. I say, okay, you've got to draw this 3 minutes. That's all you got. And I count them down. But sometimes I give them 1 minute, and they haven't had, this current class hasn't had it yet, but 30 seconds. I want you to put that image down in 30 seconds. And even if you do that in your sketchbook from observation, you're going to be so much more aware and capable of doing other things. If they put you on computers at college, if they put you, wherever they take you, you might go into claymation, moving clay models like Aardman, Wallace and Gromit, things like that. Or you may go in all kinds of different directions in the art field. You're always going to fall back on drawing, always, always, always. And it's training your eye, your observation, your brain, your hand, and your coordination to communicate, because all art is about communication. What is your idea? How do you reach your audience? How do you communicate to your audience? And drawing is the fundamental thing. Schools don't do it very much anymore, but they should, So, but because they don't, you have to. And wherever you go after that, once you get that portfolio or the sketchbook habit going, it's going to take you a long way. Trust me.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That was an awesome lesson to learn. I hope you kiddos at home learned a lot from that. I know I certainly did, and I greatly enjoyed hearing all that. And now comes my favorite part of the episode where I'm able to show you what I was working on over here while we were chatting. I'm going to warn you in advance, my lights here love to mess with the screen colors, so I will send you the actual thing so you can actually look at it, but I'm going to try my best to get it up in here without any issue. Let's see.
That's great. That's great.
Well,
now, I have a surprise for you, because you're always doing drawings of other people, and I never do caricatures, but I did one for you. So when it's caricatures.
Oh my goodness! Oh, that is like the biggest surprise. I'm always the one drawing everyone else, so like if I ever get drawn, I'm like, oh my goodness! So
no, well,
thank you so much for that.
You do it for everyone else. I thought, wouldn't it be nice to do it for you? It's one of these things. It popped into my imagination. I had to do it.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you again for coming on here and talking to me and telling all these kids about your lessons and advice. It was absolutely wonderful to have you here, and thank you again to everyone who tuned in. Again, I am your host and in-house artist, Erin Leffler. Catch you next time on the drawing board.